I'm going to call this meeting to order, please. Let the record reflect that this meeting was posted as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. And the first item is I want to comment that we do have a quorum. We have a full house. And the second item is I'm going to ask everybody please to bow their heads for a moment of silence. All right, thank you very much. And the next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Strubhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board members, Dr. Cavazos, administration, and audience. This evening, we have John Anthony Fraga from Harlingen High School South leading us in the pledge. John is a senior whose favorite subject is biology. He is an AP scholar with honors and currently ranked at the top of his class. John is a Mighty Hawk band member, president of South's FBLA chapter, student council treasurer, National Honor Society secretary, and vice president for National Technical Honor Society. He attended Travis Elementary and Vela Middle School, and upon graduation is planning on attending Rice University to major in biology with a minor in business. John is the son of Juan Antonio and Clara Fraga. Ladies and gentlemen, John Anthony Fraga.
Everyone, please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You have quite a resume. You're a very, very well-rounded young man, and we want to compliment you. Being number one in your class and all the other activities you do, that's really remarkable. You are a great representation of our district.
And of a great family.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And of a great family.
Right.
The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. I know everyone's had these over the weekend, has looked at them. So the first one is the board meeting, regular board meeting for August 12th, 2014. Are there any corrections or additions to these minutes? If there's no corrections or additions, Chair would entertain a motion.
Make a motion for approval as recommended by administration.
I second the motion.
Moved by Mr. De Leon, seconded by Mrs. Fleurier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Item 2B, August 22nd, 2014, public hearing. I'm sorry, 27th. Is that an action item for a public hearing?
I thought we did, we're doing one individual.
Yeah.
You approve the minutes.
We have to do them for each one. Okay. All right. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the public hearing of August the 27th. And can I say also the special board meeting on August the 27th?
That would be fine.
All right.
So we have two items. Any further discussion?
I second the motion.
All right. Moved by Mrs. Young, seconded by Dr. Muniz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the next item is the consent agenda, and I do want to make a comment on our proclamations for this this meeting. The presenters, Dr. Cavazos, do you have any?
Yes, Board President, board members, we have 4 proclamations tonight. First one is Hispanic Heritage Month, celebrating September 15th through the October 15th. Texas Education Human Resources Day, October 8th. Fire Prevention Week, October 5th through the 11th. National 4-H Week, October 5th through the 11th. And National School Lunch Week, October 13th through the 17th. And we recommend approval as part of consent agenda.
Okay. Are there any other items on the consent agenda that anyone wants to address?
Mr. President, Dr. Noyola, I was going to ask you about the memorandum of understanding with the Behavioral Health Solutions of South Texas. I just vaguely remember that we were going to make some changes to that, or was that not correct? Is it just basically a standard update from a previous?
No, sir, this is actually a different one.
Okay.
It's a different MOU. That previous MOU was with our local chapter, but this one is the Behavioral Health Solutions of South Texas, which is a separate organization. Their role is to provide awareness and support to campuses with regards to substance abuse, versus our other programming was dealing with behavioral issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments on the consent agenda?
President, I move approval of the proclamation.
Or
Second
the
motion.
consent agenda in general?
Yes, the proclamations as addressed 1 through 5.
And the other items on the consent agenda also?
Yes.
All right, sir. We have a motion by Mr. McShan,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Fleury. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, consent agenda is approved. The next item is the principal's report. Dr. Joe Rodriguez.
Good evening, Mr. President, Dr. Cavazos, school board members, senior staff, and members of the public. We are here this evening to provide details behind the AP program at Harlingen High School South and the initiatives that have helped prepare our students for collegiate rigor. Last year, Harlingen South took the challenge given to us by Harlingen CISD to increase our students' preparation for the AP exams, to increase the number of students participating in the exam administration, and foster greater success in their performance. It sounds easy enough, but it seems to have eluded many high schools, even some of the best in the nation. Realizing that AP data is not only a component in a comprehensive high school's accountability, but also crucial to a student's future growth, the administrative team began the school year anxious to develop a program to foster success. The administrative team examined prior year's data and brainstormed on ways in which to raise students' preparation for participation in and performance on the rigorous AP exams. The ideas transformed into what is known today as AP Palooza, within which are subject-specific AP institutes. AP Palooza speaks to several components of the strategic plan, but has a strong focus on preparing our students to be post-secondary and career ready. Next, we would like to provide you with a video highlighting some of the key components of AP Palooza as spoken by students and faculty. Following the video, Mr. Tony Layden, Associate Principal for Teaching and Learning, and Heather Adair, Instructional Coach, will provide detailed information on the program.
I've been teaching AP English for about the past, I want to say, almost 10 years. And each year when I try to prepare my students for the test, I would do after-school tutorials and practices, and the kids would do okay, and some would come by for special attention. But last year at South, we did something different. And we started with a general meeting with all AP teachers, and it was the launch of AP Palooza. And with this, we basically talked about what our goals were. We discussed the advantages for students, what they could achieve by taking AP tests. We knew that our students, we had a good number of students who had taken AP tests in the past, but we wanted to increase it. So we had to plan and strategize because many of the students were taking some students were taking 3 or 4 tests. In order to prepare, as teachers, we'd have to get together and say, okay, I will do after-school sessions on these afternoons. I'm going to take this Saturday, that Saturday. And so by cooperating, we were able to provide the maximum amount of practice time for our students. And so often, that's what kids need, is just, you know, that teacher there that we're not just instructors, but we're also their cheerleaders and saying, you can do this, this is a doable thing. So to know that I've had a part in helping to motivate these children. It's those kids that are doing the work, and they're the ones that accept the challenge. They're the ones that commit to, you know, I'm going to do my best. So I was very excited to be a part of this program. I'm really looking forward to this year.
The AP Palooza Training Institute helped us, especially for the Spanish and the French, and because the kids were able to have continuity and consistency, and they were able to be motivated, and the collaboration that we have in the department, and all the teachers in the department helped, especially the pre-AP teachers, because they picked up the motivation themselves, and they found that some students that even though they were not in the AP classes, they could probably handle and challenge the exams. So after we had the first meeting of the AP Appaloosa Institute here at Harlingen South, and all the teachers expressed their ideas, the administration was encouraging to tell us that we could tell the students that they could challenge other exams, even though they were not in the AP classes. So thankfully, because of the institutes that we had, that we were provided with, we were able to come on Saturdays or whenever the students could come, even if we had to do it in chunks, because these students at South are so involved in so many things. They sometimes cannot make it on a particular day. So the teachers were available for them at any time. And even if it is 15 minutes, we told them, it doesn't matter. Come, we can break it down in chunks. So the administration was wonderful. They provided us with resources. They were there all the time asking us as teachers, what is it that we need to do? What is it that we can help with? And it took all of us at South to be able to have the success that we had this year.
AP Palooza allowed me to go on weekends, go further in depth on the material for the AP test. I could go after school and visit my teachers for all the subjects I was taking the test for. It was very helpful, and I got all my questions asked. I didn't have to wait.
I recommend they should take the AP classes and take the tests, because if I decided not to take like AP English, I would have gotten lazy and probably never would have learned to be a better English writer. So it's definitely a challenge to help motivate you into doing better.
We learned lessons last year. We thought, okay, we're going to do this a little bit different. We're going to do that a little bit different. I'm excited, and I'm looking for continued success at Harlingen South.
Okay, good evening, Mr. President, Dr. Cavazos, school board members, senior staff, and members of the public. To emphasize Dr. Rodriguez's message, as we move forward with implementing AP Palooza with our students and staff, we found the plan to be in line with HCSC's strategic plan for transforming learning for global achievement.
And after brainstorming as an administrative team, our next step was to draw upon the expertise and the insight of our AP teachers to develop a more detailed plan. Through an AP Teacher PLC, we reviewed data, established goals, and outlined methods to provide students with enrichment activities through AP Institutes. Now, we call them AP Institutes to mirror what College Board calls the training program for AP teachers. Those are also called AP Institutes. Now, as you heard from Mrs. Vaughn in the video, a flexible calendar was essential to meet students' needs. The PLCs worked to organize institutes so that students had the opportunity to attend before school, after school, on Saturdays, and yes, even during spring break. Now, our next task was to outline student incentives and recruitment. College Board provides data on the correlation between college admissions and college completion based on participation in the AP program. At South, we wanted to go above and beyond. Therefore, we formulated a score-based scholarship program for students that scored a 3 or higher. South staff then promoted the incentives and encouraged students to participate. Overall, institutes would focus on increasing students' confidence in the subject matter, familiarizing them with the test format, and increasing their participation in and performance on the AP exams.
We kicked off AP Palooza on January 18th, with institutes running for the next 15 weeks. In total, 20 AP teachers participated over the course of the 15-week program and logged nearly 410 hours with their students. In an effort to remove obstacles for students, we collaborated with ACE after-school busing, provided snacks and noon meals on Saturdays. We also purchased materials teachers felt would be useful in their subjects' individual institutes. Activities in each institute vary depending upon the progression of the calendar. In general, all institutes address test strategies specific to that subject's test, strategies for students to use as they review the materials or practice the skills, critical reading techniques, AP-level writing activities to prepare for essays, and taking all or portion of a released AP exam. Once a month, we met with AP teachers as a PLC to review institute's progress, assess our needs, review data from the district AP benchmarks, and adjust it accordingly. A preliminary review of our 2014-15 data reveals solid growth in the AP program.
In May, 304 students at South challenged a total of 442 AP exams. 239 of those students participated in at least one AP Palooza Institute. Alongside that, when we compared the average exam scores for students that did and did not participate in the program, participating students scored a half point higher than non-participating students.
Further demonstration of the positive impact of AP Palooza is a marked increase in the number of AP scholars from 2013 to 2014. To be an AP scholar, students must score a 3 or better on 3 or more exams. For honors, it requires an exam average of 3.25 on 4 or more exams. A distinction is given for students with a 3.5 average on 5 or more exams, so this is certainly no easy task. In 2014, our number of AP scholars doubled from 8 to 16, with 3 earning honors and 1 earning distinction. Of those 16 students, all but 1 participated in the AP Palooza program. A couple of slides ago, we mentioned the score-based scholarship incentive. In addition to the support and encouragement of their teachers, this may have been one of our students' motivators. We titled the scholarship incentive the 1, 2, 3 for the 3, 4, 5. Students earning a 3 were eligible for a $100 scholarship, a 4 garnered a $200 scholarship, and a 5 brought in $300. The scholarships were funded through student activity funds set aside for this specific purpose. Overall, 102 of the 304 students taking the AP exam earned a scholarship of at least $100.
Now, one challenge at the inception of the AP Palooza program was increasing student participation without sacrificing excellence in performance. However, our students' performance did not falter. Student participation doubled. The number of exams receiving a score of 3 or above more than doubled, and we were able to maintain our overall percentage of scores at 3 or above at 32%. Now, last fall, the data also reflected that South's percentage of scores at 3 or above, shown in the graph on the right, was within the reach of the global average. Well, what does that mean? The global average is the percent of all AP exams given worldwide that scored a 3, 4, or a 5. Shown in gray on the chart, the global average was 34% in 2013. The Texas average, which isn't shown, was 28%. Harlingen South fell in at 32%. And we were able to maintain that 32%, even though we doubled our student participation. As we move forward, reaching and surpassing the global average continues to be one of our goals.
In collaboration with district administration, we are again reviewing the results, analyzing the instructional planning reports, pulling apart the data, and collecting teacher and student feedback to set our goals and outline our plan for an even stronger AP program. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing us to present this evening. And at this time, if there is any questions or comments, we can answer for you.
I see Mrs. Fleurier writing a book over here, so I know she's got a few questions.
Well, this is a joy, and I want to congratulate all of you. It was clear to those of us who were able to be at your honors ceremony last year that there was a very high level of excitement on the part of your then principal, as well as the other administrators in the room, because he had some kind of secret private information that had just been released, and he was just hard. It was hard to keep his feet on the ground. And Dr. Rodriguez, I certainly see why you are so excited, and I want to thank you all for doing this. Those who have been around the board meetings for a long time know that this is my this is one of my main themes. We each seem to have main themes. I'll share with you something I've never told anyone else. My husband said that he's going to put it on my tombstone. AP, she was always trying. And so I'm really thrilled about this. I'm really, really thrilled. There's a clear evidence that it's significant for our students. As we've often said, this is one of the reasons, perhaps the primary reason, that our district in the past has lost students. It is because they and their families are seeking educational institutions where they feel like they can get the high scores, which will prepare them better for college and will provide all sorts of opportunities for college. And clearly this is something that I've been assured came up repeatedly during the strategic plan. So I want to thank you all for paying attention to that, and I want to thank you for focusing on this. As we've often said, once we focus on something, we're good enough in this district to fix it. And it seems to me like you are well on your way, so I certainly want to congratulate you. I also want to say that I feel like this is not a site-based situation, that this is a district goal related to a district strategic goal, and I'm hoping that there's a lot of sharing that is going on, and you know, we want equity in the campuses, and so we want equitable working and planning in the campuses. From the beginning, and so I'm hoping that now that we have each tried different ways, and you all have found things that work. I'm sure HHS has found some things that work, but I'm hoping that will be a joint effort from here on out, that it will always be a district-wide effort, so that we can all get to that global place. I've taken notes on everything you've said, and I'm just so excited about what you have done. It's going to make a huge difference for your students. It's already begun to change the culture of our district. It's clearly changing the culture of South. And I'd like to say, Dr. Cavazos, as we again talk about transformation, how many times we've all said transformation never was just about technology. It was about what are the various tools that will enable us to achieve greater student success. And so clearly I see a lot of things jumping out. The beginning as early as January, the number of teachers that you had involved, Saturdays as well as after school and before school, taking the small groups of time. If students couldn't come, we didn't just say, I'm so sorry, no students could come. We said, come 15 minutes tomorrow. Making it work for the students is what it's all about. And I'm so proud of South. I'm very proud. I can see why you're clicking your heels, and we're all clicking our heels with you, and we wish you just the greatest success in the world, and we wish the entire district the greatest success in the world as we collaborate with various campuses to see to it that we're all using similar strategies and time periods to achieve similar success. I'm really proud of y'all.
Mr. President.
Doctor?
I just want to echo, obviously, the remarks, I think, very well summarized by Jerry. I think that this is an exciting time in our district, and to some of the, I guess, concerns for having horizontal and vertical sort of fidelity to what we're trying to do here. You're going to be in a perfect position, Dr. Rodriguez, to make sure that happens, and so this is a good time for that sort of transition, because I do think we need to have that sort of vertical and horizontal sort of equity there to all these things we're doing. Just a couple of observations. And we had a good discussion, and I think we'll probably hear from Dr. Cavazos his summary when we talk about the Transforming Teaching and Learning committee meeting. We had a similar discussion about this topic as well. One of the things I just concerns me a little bit is and I don't know if you all have seen some of these observations as well, is sort of what incents people, in terms of the incentives, what incentivizes people, students and parents out there to do certain kind of behaviors, whether it's in choices, right, to take the easy courses and things. I mean, so if you think about it this way, if your focus is on GPA, certainly, and perhaps I would say the same thing, scholarships. Put those in the same basket. If your focus is GPA or scholarships, suddenly now that incentivizes you to take easier courses, not AP courses, perhaps not even dual enrollment, but just to sort of just get that highest. It's a short-term goal, very short-sighted, that doesn't necessarily help college readiness or success or graduation. But how do we, and I just asked this question, I don't know the answer, how do we change the perception out there? How do we change the sort of that sort of goal, so where folks are incentivized for college success and college readiness? Because if that is your goal, then now you want the most prepared student that's going to take the most rigorous courses, AP type courses, dual enrollment type courses. And if that's your goal, it's more of a long-term goal, right? You're also going to encourage them to read. We've been talking a lot about reading, it seems lately, thanks to the work that you guys are doing in the district right now. But we know from Commissioner Raymond Paredes that, you know, those students that can read a novel in 1 week has been shown to correlate very highly to college graduation. So reading is very key. But so is taking rigorous courses, and here's the key, getting very used to taking those tests, those exams. You've got to finish it off, and you've got to get used to being good at taking standardized exams to have any success. Unfortunately, you know, that's just the reality of the world in higher ed, and of course getting into postgraduate schools and professional schools, et cetera. So I just want to put a plug out there. I don't know if you all have seen the same things, but I just see a focus in many students and parents, and to take the easy way out, because the incentive is GPA and scholarships. And again, I think we ought to fix that, because our students that take these rigorous courses shouldn't get dinged on the GPA necessarily as much as they do. They shouldn't have less opportunity to have scholarships than somebody else. So we have to fix that. But that's the perception out there, is that, well, you know, I'm going to have less opportunity to get these things because I'm going to be ranked number 8 versus number 2. It's just out there. So I'm just asking the question. I don't know the solution. This is where you guys or the educators can figure this out. But I can tell you that the problem exists, and in my heart I feel that we've got to have the focus where it should be, which is college success, college readiness, and college graduation. And to get there, we've got to have our kids taking the most difficult courses, even if their goal is a 2-year associate's degree that, by the way, pays $50,000 to $70,000. Right, Javier? So some of these are very rigorous coursework, and these employers have high expectations, and they want their folks to have a very high skill set and knowledge base. So anyway, thanks for what you guys are doing. I think we're off to a phenomenal start. But anyway, that's my comments.
Anybody else?
Just briefly, excellent job. Actually, I'm sitting here reflecting the answers we really don't know. Probably students know a lot more about it than we do as adults. I know as parents and grandparents, we want the best for our children, but something connects them. And I know that John Fraga, he's out in the audience, he's an outstanding student. He could probably answer some of those questions about what you asked, Dr. Pettis. But I would say this, we have part of that infrastructure in place. We have the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, and I would say that AP Palooza, that would be a nice topic to have, to address that and see what they have to say. I'm sure John probably he didn't tell his parents everything, I'm sure. You'll find that out later, 5 or 6 years later, they'll tell you things. I don't know if they tell the truth or not. But I think that would be an excellent opportunity, Dr. Cavazos, to address that. We know that students are very, very busy. And I think about standardized tests. We have them, but we don't have standardized children. And that's the thing that we have to begin to look at. The policy for a school board and leaders is that we need to look at not standardizing children. All children are different. And if we can get past that, I know there's some innovative things going on right now in Texas. I can't remember the House bill, Senate bill that went before the governor, and he vetoed it. 21 school districts. Harlingen was one from the region, so was McAllen, and then others across the state. Would allow some flexibility to assess learning, to not just be focused on the standardized tests. And I think that's one of the biggest impediments that we have, in that we have standardized tests because we have standardized children. We know that's not the case, particularly here in the Rio Grande Valley. So that being said, I just wanted to say I think it would be a very good idea to engage our students in this process and then give us some very, I think, excellent feedback. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you all very much. Very, very good report, and great things are happening. Thank you. The next item is public comments. I understand we have none tonight. So then we'll move on to item number 6, matters relating to transformation and school support. We'll get a committee report on the Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee. Dr. Cavazos.
Mr. President, board members, staff, and audience, on September the 2nd, we had our Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. 2 items that were discussed at that committee meeting highlights actually the presentation done by Dr. Rodriguez and his administrative team at South. First item was presented by Dr. Noyola, our Chief Academic Officer, and Santiago Villanueva, our Advanced Academics Coordinator, and it was entitled 2014 AP Program, Moving Towards Excellence. And so what you heard tonight was more information that was discussed at the committee meeting, but at the committee meeting we highlighted that the focus is really looking at the AP program and looking beyond our current practices and how we're going to ensure that we are providing rigor and opportunities to kids that are participating in those programs. That presentation was followed by the presentation on talent acquisition update phase 2. And in that conversation was an outline of what we've been through last year through talent acquisition and the successes we have had. But it also spoke to the importance of really getting out there and acquiring the very best talent, but retaining our very best talent in the district as well. Phase 2 presentation focused primarily on this coming year and what we can expect to see in the spring as we move on to acquiring the very best talent for Harlingen Public Schools. One item that was highlighted in that presentation was identifying the 5 top universities across the country with the best teaching preparation programs, making personal contacts with those universities, and making certain that they understand what we're looking for in Harlingen and acquiring and recruiting the very best. Items that came up during that discussion was how will we incentivize the people that we have here to continue to retain the very best, but how will we also incentivize to bring the very best? And so I'll turn it over to our chair, Dr. Nolan Perez, to add anything that on that committee meeting.
Just briefly, excellent summary. Again, with the AP work that we're doing is very important. So I appreciate the further insights tonight. Just very excited. Everybody on this board is trying to catch up with Mrs. Fleury's excitement, but trust me, it's a priority for all of us, and so we appreciate what you all are doing on that regard, and I know we're going to get there. In terms of the talent acquisition, it's amazing to me if you look around this board and you look around the room, we're all here because of teachers. Teachers make all other professions possible, right? And they're the first mentor you have in your life usually, and your first sort of role model and things like that. And so it's so important, the work that you're doing, Dr. Cavazos, and your administrative team, because and I appreciate the fact that this district is not waiting for sort of instructions from Austin or bills or things like. We're just being innovative and cutting edge. And so kudos to you, Dr. Cavazos. Keep doing what you're doing. Each and every meeting of this committee, you bring forward some really cutting edge, high achieving sort of high impacting recommendations, and we're really excited with the work you're doing. So thanks again for a wonderful meeting.
All right, the next item is matters relating to curriculum and instruction. First one is approval of out-of-state trip for Harlingen High School South Band to New York City. Dr. Quintana and Shane Shinsato, excuse me.
I think he's going to need 8 chaperones. Is that correct?
That'd be the team of 8.
That's right.
We're having the first bake sale right after the board meeting. President Powers, Dr. Cavazos, board members, senior staff, and audience members, thank you so much for, first of all, for all your support for the music program. And the Performing Arts Center is such a beautiful testament to that, and we are ever grateful for that. FMG Local provides that our high school programs may travel every 4 years out of state. And so this request is for out-of-state travel, and South Band is in 2015, spring of 2015, that falls within the 4-year rotation. And as Dr. Cavazos and Mr. Powers suggested, they are planning a trip to New York City with your approval. Do you have any questions for us?
I would like to move approval with enthusiasm and hear any details you'd like to share, but I certainly would like to move approval.
What's the agenda?
We are planning the trip to take place from April 18th through the 21st. That would limit only 2 days of missing school, and it would not interfere with any testing or anything along those lines. It doesn't conflict with any UIL activities either. That's why we chose those dates. We are planning to fly from the Valley, preferably Harlingen, straight into the Newark Airport or LaGuardia. And we have, the hotel is planned to stay right off of Times Square. We have on the schedule, the first thing would be Saturday night would be the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, which is kind of one of the main things we're looking forward to. And then there's a visit to the Freedom Tower. When we went in 2004, it was recently after 9/11, so there was just big holes in the ground, and we did get to see that. So it's going to be nice for kind of to see what happens when you get knocked down. You can come back even stronger. So that's going to be one of our lessons there. And then we are planning to hopefully go to a Yankees game, if not maybe a Mets game. And I can't think of some of the things. A Broadway show. We're going to go see Wicked on Broadway, and maybe a few other things that I'm forgetting right now. But a lot of good musical opportunities and just things for the students to see outside the Valley.
That's terrific.
I'll second Mrs. Fleurier's motion for approval.
All right. Moved by Mrs. Fleurier and seconded by Dr. Pettis. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Bon voyage.
Thank you very much.
Right.
We appreciate it.
Now it's
We want to report when you get back.
That's right. I had to send it.
Right.
All right.
All right. The next item is the statewide student assessment and 2014 preliminary accountability ratings. Mr. Harlan Howell.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Foster, superintendent staff. For tonight's report, the board test results for 2014 and the state accountability ratings will be presented for your review. When we look at our goal for the district, it refers to using data that measures all the students' weaknesses and strengths in order to address their curriculum needs. Presented tonight are the results for students in the STAR assessment program, where we will look at some of the weaknesses as well as the strengths. The STAR program includes grade level tests in grades 3 through 8 for STAR modified, STAR alternate, STAR for special ed students, the STAR modified and alternate, STAR L in Spanish, STAR for our LEP students, and of course the end of course test at the high school level in Algebra 1, Biology, English 1, English 2, and U.S. History. In addition, we'll look at the results of the district for the state accountability system. Our first graph provides a comparison in reading of our district results for all students to the Region 1 average and the state average. The district is represented by the blue bar. The Region 1 is represented by the teal green bar. And the state is, it's either a mauve or fuchsia. I need to talk to the people who do this for me. Results are straight off the summary report for all students that we receive from the state. This is not the accountability group and does not include the star L, star M, and star alternate. For reading, all grade levels show the district higher or the same as the Region 1 average, but lower than the state average. When we look at math, the district compares most favorably in grades at 3, 4, and 7, being higher than both the Region 1 and the state. For science, our weakest grade level is the 8th grade. And if we look at our social studies, you can see that also falls in the 8th grade. For writing, we compare favorably where the district is higher than the state at the 4th grade and only 1% lower than the 7th grade. As we look at the overview for our Algebra 1 and biology, this is the first year that we've had a 9th grade campus academy where all of our 9th grade students will be for the first time testers. And so we're going to be looking at the 9th grade campus as well as the district as a whole. On this page you can see our district-wide 64% of our students met the Phase in 1 Level 2 performance standard in Algebra 1 compared to 61% in 2013. And in the case of biology, we also had an improvement for the first time where they were located primarily at Kano, but we also had students at early college high school. Percentage meeting the Phase in 1 Level 2 performance standard for biology was 83%, which is a substantial increase from the 74% in 2013. So this increase, if we again look at our 9th grade campus first-time testers, you can see in Algebra 1 in 2013 we had a 51% rate, whereas in 2014 it's at 63%. So that was a 12% increase in our Algebra 1. For biology, we were at 80% in 2013 and 88% in 2014. Now, the English 1 testing in the prior year was divided into 2 tests. It was reading and writing. So we can't really have a valid comparison between 2013 and 2014 because they combined the reading and writing in 2014 into 1 test. But if we look at that, you can see that for English 1 reading and English 1 writing, we had in 2013 we had a 65 and 49%, and then for 2014, our combined the combined test we had a 64%, which is pretty good increase in our English 1. If we look at our middle schools, they also tested in EOC in Algebra 1. And you can see that Coakley had 100%, Memorial had 99%, Vernon had 100%, Butetis had 95%, and Bela had 100%. And one of the things that we strive for is the Level 3 advanced score on the far right-hand side. The Level 3 advanced is the high rate, but if you look at Coakley, they had a 60%. We had 46% there at Memorial. We had 31% at Vernon. We had 35% at Butetis and 58% at Bela. This is what we're striving for, is that Level 3 advanced. When we look at our overview for our English 1 and English 2, as I already mentioned, EOC test results are not comparable between the 2 years, but we will do some comparison, or we will show you some, our 2 high schools. Let's start back with early college high school. Early college high school had a good year in testing. As you can see, Algebra 1, they went from 78% to 93%. And for biology, they went from 96% to 98%. English 1 was 80%. That was their lowest percentage. But then look at English 2, 95%. Excellent for early college high school. And U.S. history had 100%. The overview for the U.S. history, really this past year was as our students have gone through in the EOC, the 11th grade is the grade level that they would be taking the U.S. history. And so primarily, last year was the first year we really had a large group taking U.S. history. Those students are seniors this year. Those students will be graduating this year. So if we look at our U.S. history rate, again, the 2013 wasn't a good comparison for U.S. history. This is Harlingen High School. And when you look at Algebra 1 and Biology and English 1, those are retested. That's why those percentages are lower. The English 2 is first-time testers, but the U.S. history is first-time testers. U.S. history was 87%. This is at Harlingen High School. And if we look at Harlingen High School South, you can see they had 88% for U.S. history. And their English 2 was 61%, which was a little bit higher. But the average for the district in English 2 was higher in 2014 than it was in 2013. We also want to show you the special populations, because special populations, again, is an area that we need to concentrate in the district as far as our special ed population and our limited English proficient. Those are two areas that we'll be concentrating. The teacher plan will be addressing a lot of the needs that we have in those areas. The migrant is also an area that we'll be looking at. So where you see the red is where we basically had some drops from the previous year. Doesn't necessarily mean the percentage is bad, it just means that it dropped from the previous year. And you can see at 8th grade, we had, for 2014, we had almost drops in all students, economically disadvantaged, special education, migrants, the GT, there was the asterisk, and for your information, that's not the percent that passed, that's the percent that reached level 3, the advanced level. Again, here's your reading ELA information on your special population.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Harlan, I did not understand what I didn't understand about GT. Would you explain that to me again, please?
The GT, our percentage there isn't the level, the phase-in level 1 standard for passing. It is the advanced level 3. I mentioned earlier that we're striving for our GT students. We probably had 100% hit the passing rate, but we wanted to show you, and I apologize, the asterisk was left off at the bottom of the notation, but that is the advanced level. In other words, it's the highest level that you can have
of the numbers
for the phase-in. Or it's not a phase-in, it's actually an established standard. So here's your science, writing, and social studies for your special population. Now looking at a state accountability. Moving on to state accountability, as you know, we now have what we call the index system. It's 4 indexes, where you have index 1, which looks at student achievement, and index 2 looks at the progress of our students. Index 3 looks at closing the performance gap, and index 4, which y'all are really interested in, is the post-secondary readiness. The performance level index, what are these indexes? Well, each one measures or contributes points to the index score. And this is quite a bit different from the previous tax system we were under before, that accountability system. Back then, if you had a special population, and we had this happen many times, where our ratings were either exemplary, recognized, or acceptable, if you had a subpopulation that was such that maybe had 50 students, that you end up bringing you down from an exemplary to recognized. We had that happen many times under the old accountability system. Well, under the index system, it doesn't allow for a subpopulation to bring your scores down. But there are some things that we'll talk about in a minute, the system safeguards, which address those issues. So the index system, they're required to meet one accountability target. For index 1 is 55. For index 2 and 3, it was the bottom 5th percentile. And index 4 had a little bit more complicated, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. With the performance index, the resulting rating reflects overall performance for the campus or district rather than the weakest performance of one student, group, and subject that I just mentioned. Multiple indexes can be used in the framework to ensure accountability for every student, and any number of indicators and student groups can be added to the system. Now, the phase-in standard that we used this year was the same standard as last year, which is going to be the same in the spring. So they changed the phase-in, so they're going to keep the standard the same. So we already know what the standard's going to be for passing. So that helps us when we start working on preparing for the test. Our criteria are rating labels, are met standard, met alternate standard, alternative standard. That's for like Keys Academy. Improvement required, not rated, or not rated due to data integrity. Okay, here are the index criteria for index 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I mentioned already the standard, the indicator. And here's for the alternative campus. Notice the alternative campus has much lower standards. This is the district accountability summary, and you can see that we're above all the state. The little bar graph there on the left-hand side shows that we're above that line that's indicated there for the state average. We also had some system safeguards where we had, my eyesight's getting bad. Where we had 50 out of 57, and the majority of that was in performance areas, and the performance areas were like the special ed and such. Now the system safeguards are not a rating. It's not a rating, it's simply telling us that here are the areas that you need to concentrate on, and you will have to write a plan of action in order to bring those particular areas, those special populations, those scores up. But actually the indexes is the rating system, and for our district, here's the rating. Everybody met all the indexes, index 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we received 70 distinctions compared to 28 last year. And those distinctions, I think, are going to be held over for another board meeting where these campuses will be recognized. 70 distinctions is a very large number of distinctions for the district. And we'll have even more next year. This is starting to compare the indexes with other schools in the valley. Region 1 area. We always like to see comparisons. This is the Region 1. This is schools within the Region 1. And so we actually did some index comparisons there. If you see index 1, student achievement, the state standard was set at 55%, like I mentioned earlier, but the state average was 77%. The Region 1 was 71, the district was 72%. If we look at student progress, the regional average was 42%, the state average was 40%, the district average was 39%. Looking at index 3, state average was 38%, region was 41%, and district was 39%. Actually, Region 1 did pretty good when you start comparing to the state. And we'll see some other comparisons in a minute. Index 4, post-secondary indicator score, state standard was 57, and the state average was 69%, the district average was 68. And I would like to take a minute to show you Mr. Alfaro from works in our office did some additional graphs where we looked at the readiness standards, post-secondary readiness for index 4. It's composed of 4 areas. It's composed of a STAR score. It's composed of the graduation rate, also your recommended high school program rate, and then the 4th is the post-secondary indicators for math and English language arts. So those are 4 areas that we look at. And usually when we looked at in our PAPR book, we only looked at different indicators, but this is a combination. Each one of these indicators is weighted 25%. So as we look at the state, and we look at, let me find my arrow, the Region 1, and we look at Edinburgh and the district. Then we look at a comparison. Each campus, and this is Harlingen High School, Harlingen High School South, each campus has 4 comparable campuses for the state accountability system. 40, I'm sorry, not 4, 40. So what you see here are the 40 schools that they were in group with. And the grouping is grouped according to economically disadvantaged, size. A lot of factors go into play as far as the grouping. So when you look at this, you'll see where Harlingen High School and Harlingen High School compare with those comparable campuses. And if we look at early college high school, you can see they compare very well with like campuses, other early college high schools that are throughout the state, they compare with. And we're actually going to do this for every index and for every campus so that we can have their comparison groups and how they fall with their comparison group and provide that for our campus.
And we would like to see that, please.
Okay. And just a few more slides. The TELPAS is the test that is given to our ELL students, our left students. And this past year, the test was such that we had to indicate the number of years in U.S. schools, and based upon the number of years in U.S. schools and whether the student scored beginning, intermediate, advanced, or advanced high, put them in a plan. That plan gives them an opportunity to score progress, even though they may not be at the state standard, passing standard. So if they met that progress, then that was in the indicator 2, our progress measure for ELL progress. They counted for us for ELL progress. So this was the first year this went into place. So the TELPAS becomes a very integral part of our index system, which gives us the index 2 progress of these students, our ELL students. Looking at system safeguards, I mentioned earlier about safeguards. Again, this looks at the special population areas, and results will be reported on any cell that meets accountability minimum size criteria, which is 25 students. And then failure to meet the safeguard target for any reported cell must be addressed in the campus or district improvement plan. Again, it's not a rating, it's simply telling us this particular population, you need to address it in your plan. So these were for the state accountability, which was, again, uses index 1, 55%. These campuses in those particular areas will need to address those areas. So we had, I think, 11 campuses, basically. I think 13 campuses that will be addressing, in their campus improvement plan, will be addressing these needs. And the final slide is simply the new House bill requirement that we have for our performance in community and student engagement compliance. This was brought apart by House Bill 5, and it's kind of a self-evaluation in all those different areas. And y'all, I think we've already presented this to the board in the past, so you've probably already seen this and have some information. And that pretty well concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Do we have any questions?
I would like to have a hard copy of that campus-by-campus analysis on the self-assessment, please, just on that one sheet. Perhaps the other board members would be interested in that as well, because that's new, new for us in the district, and it'll be interesting to see how we did. I'm sure it was a lot to grapple with on each campus. So,
I would just kind of like to hear either from Dr. Noyola or Dr. Cavazos just sort of your thoughts after looking through all this data in terms of how do we use this going forward to maximize student achievement? What are your thoughts on just looking at the data for first, and secondly, how do we use it going forward? That's a fair question.
Absolutely. So, we've talked a lot about earlier tonight about the AP program and the importance of data and the fact that ultimately data is what drives our improvement in all our areas. If we don't use that as a foundation to guide our work, then we're just kind of shooting in the dark. And so ultimately data is what we use to drive everything. We've talked about data now becoming a critical piece with regards to our AP programming. In earlier Transforming Teaching and Learning, we've talked about data even as far down as our early childhood and how that will drive a lot of our work as we move forward. I will say that some of the interesting pieces for me as Harlan was speaking was the post-secondary readiness piece, where he showed Harlingen High School and Harlingen South within their comparison group. Sometimes it's very easy to just look at the rest of the districts, but not every district in our area is exactly the same. And so when we look at those comparison groups and look at 39 other campuses that look exactly the same as a Harlingen High School or exactly the same as a Harlingen South, it really gives us a better picture with regards to, are we moving in the right direction? And so when we look at those 40 schools and we see that both of our or actually all three of the high schools that we had are in the upper quartile of performance, that's a very positive piece that I think that we need to probably highlight with our staffs a little bit more, because it really lends credence to the work that they're doing at their campuses.
Ma'am?
Yes, please.
Yeah, one observation I would like to make in response to Dr. Pettis' question is, and Dr. Noyola, you have spoken eloquently about this, and that is that when we look at our scores in the 8th grade on one of the sheets that you presented, Harlan, that I noticed that 8th grade is a challenging year for us in terms of the scores, and we all realize that if we're going to excel on the AP test later on, we have to begin our work certainly by the 8th grade. And so when we have our students having difficulty in the 8th grade and then going on to the high schools, it gives our high schools a far more challenging task to prepare those students, particularly in the areas of science with regard to math and all the language arts courses and social studies courses in regard to their reading levels. So I think that's a very important piece of data that this shows. However, I will have to say that our Harlingen staff was on top of that already. So.
Well, just one comment. I agree with you, Mrs. Fleury, but I also have to sort of mention, one of the points that Mr. McShann mentioned earlier, I think was spot on. Even though these tests are very, very important, to get to show that there's comprehension, et cetera, and of course we've talked earlier about the AP, and then of course subsequently at the college level how important some of these things are. But Mr. McShann mentioned it right on the money, and it really begins at an earlier age, where really the focus becomes, and this is why it goes back to some of the work you're doing, Dr. Cavazos, Dr. Noyola, and the whole district in terms of early literacy and the importance of focusing at when we get them, or hopefully even pre-K somehow, if we can expand that down the road, because if we can just turn on these kids to the broader level of learning and to just turn their hearts and their minds on, turn that switch on, flip that switch, and get these kids really excited and passionate about learning and about reading, all of the rest of the stuff kind of falls into place if you think about it, right? And so, but your point is very well taken. But if they're at grade level, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, doesn't it become a heck of a lot easier, even at 8th grade, because there's no issue at that point anymore. Right. And so, I think the data is great. I just, I'm curious to see what Dr. Cavazos' sort of summarizing highlights are here. But I think we're definitely. We have some highlights. We have things to highlight. I agree with you. We've got a lot of things to be excited about, but we can't just sort of look at one thing in a silo, because with this early literacy and everything, it's all coming together, right. And the foundation's got to be there. And to George's point, I mean, we've got to just get folks excited about learning, and it starts with that magic, with that going back to talent acquisition, to having that teacher that is just gets them excited about things, and that's when you get these kids just really excited, and then the rest kind of falls into place. So.
And just as a follow-up to what you just said, Dr. Pettis, ultimately, every assessment, every state assessment that we administer in this state is in essence a reading test.
Sure. Because
every question that they are answering, they're having to read and analyze and understand in order to arrive at the correct answer. And so this focus on early literacy is going to be essential to moving that needle exactly to the point that you just made.
And the focus on dyslexia, since one of our own schools presented last spring that 20% of our entire population should be being tested as, and we're finding within the testing as dyslexic. It's very difficult to have the reading program when you have 20% of your population that needs a special focus, and yet we're moving toward that focus, so I'm pleased about that.
Mr. De Leon?
Yeah, maybe this is something that Mr. Howard, Dr. Noyola, you can answer.
you know, looking at some of the reports at the very beginning, you see the progress that and I don't have the answer to this question. Maybe you have some data that can support that. But you see at an early age at the elementary levels that these kids are performing very, very well. And as they get older, the scores start declining. And maybe it's because at an early age they're excited about school, they're excited about learning, they're sponges, and there's a lot of positive things that go on. But then somewhere along the line, you know, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, it stops becoming fun maybe. And I don't know, maybe it's something that as they're getting older, the mindset starts changing to, well, it's you're on your own. It's more self-paced. You're growing up. You've got to do things on your own, and the gap of deficiency starts growing a lot more. And I don't know. And I think at the elementary levels, and I'm just generalizing, but at the elementary level, a lot of the good things are happening, and they're passing the baton at the middle schools. And then the middle schools are passing the baton to the high schools, and somewhere along the line, the batons are dropping, or they're not as secure as they could be. And so, do you have any data that's supporting? Is it because the independence is going more towards the individuals, and maybe in the elementary levels, the parents are excited about being in parental involvement with their kids, and then as they get in junior high, it's embarrassing that their mom and dad is with them or something. I don't know what it could be,
Yeah.
but I do know that drop does start occurring. And then what Dr. Bettis is saying about everybody should be functioning at a grade level, the gap starts widening. And
Right.
from grade level from 2nd to 3rd now becomes from 8th to 12th, and the gap starts broadening. So do you have any information, data, or explanation on how some of those things are occurring?
So it's multiple factors, and I think you've hit on a number of them, but in particular at elementary, as we're getting our pre-K students, some are already coming with a gap. And so where the goal ultimately would be to have a year's growth, when a student is already starting with a gap, they're not having to make a 1-year growth, they may be having to make a 1.5-year growth. And so they may be a half year behind, and so now they have to recapture a 1.5 years, and then beyond that, now it becomes 2 years. And so that gap slowly starts to widen. That's why that early literacy piece becomes so essential. If we can get them on that grade level and really address that early literacy piece, then the reading, which is so fundamental to everything else, can help move that along. But I agree that there's also other factors to that. When we look at our TEKS at the elementary level, the TEKS from 3rd to 5th grade are very similar. Those TEKS are exactly the same, they've just added a little bit extra dimension. When you make the change in TEKS from 5th grade TEKS to the middle school TEKS, there are, I'd say about a 60% average of new TEKS that come into play. Then you start to see 6th to 8th grade, the TEKS stay the same with just a little bit added nuance. And then when you change the TEKS from 8th grade to high school, there's another big mass of new TEKS that come into play. And so you combine the newness of 60% new TEKS in addition to, and don't quote me on the number, but it is a large percentage, combined with the fact that we have kids whose gap is widening. So all of that becomes an issue, and in addition to all the other things that you've talked about with regards to parental involvement, with regards to teenagers who sometimes their focus is not always what's going on in the classroom. And so you start to take all of those pieces together and you start to see a lot of deficiencies. But ultimately, I really believe strongly that if the reading component can be addressed with particular focus, much to what I stated before, state assessments are reading assessments. Doesn't matter if it's a science, if it's a social studies, it's ultimately about that student being able to comprehend and understand what they are reading on that test question. And so if we can ensure that our students are staying on grade level, if they're sitting at that 6th grade and they're reading that question, even if there's a number of new TEKS, and they're able to comprehend the question and decipher what is being asked, they would have a much better chance ultimately of showing success on these assessments. But that there is one factor, I don't think that there is one. There's just too many. But there certainly are some factors that we can address immediately.
Dr. Nell, I wonder also to that, I'm gonna throw another loop here, and maybe it's not true or not, but I wonder if there's a flaw in the testing itself as well, that because I can tell you that I don't know, to be honest with you, that what is tested at the elementary level, the focus from the state has always been sort of to get that rigor sort of closer to college and so I think there's the testing is a little bit sort of better as you go further in in secondary, that allows for that differentiation. I don't know that type of testing that we're doing at the elementary level really allows for that really differentiation that we really need to make meaningful use of the data to predict how they're going to do later on. And that may be an issue as well. So I just throwing that out there, so because we may be looking at apples and oranges, thinking like, wow, we're doing great, but really they're not reading as proficiently as they should be, and they're not speaking, and et cetera, et cetera. And so anyway, I thought I'd just throw that out there.
Yeah, and you know, when we look at state assessment, just period, whether it's due to efficiency or how soon we get data back to campuses, it's a multiple choice test. And so can you really assess the learning of a student based on just one multiple choice test versus using other multiple assessments to determine whether a student is being successful and whether they are moving forward? So ultimately, the construction of that test, just in terms of what the state has determined is the most effective, or I should say most efficient way for them to be able to assess the performance of our district, sometimes is not the best means by which we determine whether students really are being successful and whether they're truly understanding the content and the instruction that's going on in our classrooms.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, Mr. De Leon, that part of the problem has been the test. You're absolutely right, in that we couldn't measure progress. I've been through tabs, teams, pods,
That's right. You've been everywhere.
And now finally they have a test that we can actually look and measure progress, what's happening with the students in the classroom. So, and that's only been in the last 2 years. So this is going to help. It's going to help us measure whether the students are making progress at all different grade levels.
Very good. Thank you.
May I, Dr. Muniz?
Question/comment. We talk about these variables. And of course, there's variables we can't control, variables we can control. And of course, the variables we can control are the teachers, teaching style. I recently had the opportunity to go to Treasure Hills Elementary and talk to their staff and visit their campus. And I was impressed. They have this book that they're handing out to all their teachers, and it's called Teach Like a Pirate, right? And I've read that book. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm pretty amazed. So my question here is, are we taking these applications and putting them in the higher levels and allowing our teachers to teach that way? And if not, why not?
And so one of our initiatives so to your point, I think that as we've looked at our strategic plan, that's led the way to a lot of the things that we are doing when we talked about addressing our 4 C's with creativity and critical thinking, and how do we, because once you start teaching that way, that's when you start to raise those levels. So that's become a critical piece of our strategic plan. And so this is a piece that you'll be hearing a little bit more as we move into our Transforming Teaching and Learning Committees. But one of the pieces that we are addressing district-wide is ensuring equity for our students, in that it doesn't matter which classroom you go to, every teacher has been taught the best learning strategies to incorporate in our classrooms. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but one of the pieces that we're undertaking is ensuring that all, and Dr. Glasses, you know the number of teachers that we have. I'm not as good as you are at remembering those numbers, but our goal is to ensure that by the end of this year, every single teacher in our district from pre-K to 12 has been taught best practices, and then part of that then becomes on the monitoring side of our principals, is going into our classrooms and ensuring that our teachers are using these best practices, so that now we have equity across the board, and it's not the student who happens to be sitting in this classroom where great things are going on versus this classroom. So our goal this year is to ensure that all of our teachers are taught the best learning strategies, best instructional strategies, so that all our students are being taught to that book, taught like a pirate in the sense of ensuring that we are giving them our quality instruction.
2 observations, if I can share with you, when I was there at the campus. All the children, every class we went into came up to the principal and said, "Pirate, pirate, pirate." It was amazing. They're buying into it, you know? And the second thing I realized is I want to go back and be a teacher. I'm reading this book and I'm going, this is awesome.
Right.
Anyway, those are my comments.
You have to get off the board.
Yeah, you can't, we won't let you off, yeah.
Mr. Howell, thank you very much. That was
Yeah,
a very
yeah.
informative report. Thank you for all the hard work you and your staff do. This has been very informative. Thank you.
Good job.
I'd just
Thank
like to say one thing, and Dr. Cavazos, you're going to close, but just reflecting what has happened since the board made the decision to hire the new superintendent, Dr. Cavazos. That wasn't that long ago. Officially, I think it was November. Officially.
It feels like a, oh.
But I think he really started the latter part of about this time last year, he began to become interim. But just for the public to know, a lot has happened with this district in terms of changing the system in a way so that we can provide the support to student achievement. And some of those things, and I'd like for you to point that out, Dr. Cavazos, you know, the organizational structure, other things that are in place now that were not in place a year ago, okay? And we've seen progress even the short time that the systems weren't fully in place, but they're beginning to get in place starting right now. If you could frame that for us in terms of what did we do differently organizationally? What did we do to align that support system to the strategic plan that, you know, Dr. Pettis and I had the honor to be part of? If you share that with us, I think the future is very bright for this district. I think that we are on the way to giving the kind of support necessary for student achievement to really rise. And a lot of things are in place from the beginning. If you would just kind of describe some of those things, I think the public would certainly appreciate what we've done and what it will really ultimately mean for this district.
So let me begin by first saying that this data that Mr. Howell goes and discusses with us all, we spent a lot of time unpacking that and really understanding the implications and what the predictors that we can undertake using the data. But this is just one part of the data that we look at. You heard about the AP scores, which is a different set of data. But at the end of the day, it's really looking at how are we going to put systems and structures in place to move the organization forward. So Mr. McShann speaks to this time last year, when I was named the interim superintendent, we launched the strategic planning process. And through that process, we involved over 800 people to come together and partner with us to really understand what is our highest aspirations for our students in HCISD. And from there came a lot of ideas, a lot of need to go back and really analyze and understand the data. Tonight's a celebration because what this board adopted in February as the strategic plan, but launched last September, this is the fruits of that labor. And this is just the beginning. This district is in an upward trend. Every campus met the state accountability system. We received 70 distinctions to comparison of 28 prior to that. There's a lot of great things happening in the district. However, it's simply a roadmap of where we need to be. To Dr. Pettis' point, it's all about that classroom teacher and the importance of their role and their important work in the classroom. We've got to inspire the kids. We've got to engage them in the learning. And we have to make certain that the rigor is there. But more importantly, our kids need to be able to read and comprehend what they're reading. And so I want to thank publicly, more importantly than the senior team and the principals, our teachers for the work they do day in and day out, the 1,600 teachers that we have in this district, a little more now, but also the Board of Trustees, because you all saw the importance of a strategic plan and setting us on a course to ensure that we're in an upward trend in our trajectory to excellence. Transforming teaching and learning for global achievement is not just a set of words that are out there floating. This board and this administration expects that that's exactly what we're doing in all our classrooms across the district. But we also have a lot to celebrate. These scores is something that Harlingen should be proud of. The AP success that we're having is something that Harlingen should be proud of. Are we going to rest? No. Our commitment is even much more strong, because the strategic plan speaks to we will become the premier district across the state. And we cannot do that by simply accepting our current reality. It is simply unpacking our current reality, but using it as a springboard to get us even further along. Our kids are depending on it. You all have made that very clear. We continue to make it clear across the district. It's about inspiring our kids. And I get criticized a little bit when I say 100% of our students will read at grade level entering third grade. But we must set that target, because the gaps that we experience throughout the organization only magnify themselves, because we need to start early. I want to applaud the work of my Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Alicia Noyola, with my administrators for elementary and secondary, Dr. Rodriguez, and of course Lloyd Romero, because you all allowed that this whole organization be reorganized to align ourselves to the strategic plan. You all allowed that to take place. You all encouraged that the courage be existent in making these bold moves, and reminded us that it's important to select the very best people, retain the very best people, but move the organization. And so there was a call to action with a strategic plan, and collectively we're making progress. When you look at the comparison groups of South and Cardinal Campus and Early College High School, when you look at their comparison group and we're at the top end, there is no doubt in my mind that we're in an upward trend, and we will be looked at for what is happening in Harlingen and continue to be looked at. I thank you as a board because you all have set the tone, but I remind us all that it's all our call to action, from the teachers to the operations people and to the 3,000 plus employees that we have in this district. We're reminded that we're responsible for every student here in Harlingen. So I thank you for allowing the strategic plan to take root. You continue to hear the bold things that we're doing in Harlingen responsibly, but this is just the beginning. And so those are my words. I wanted to summarize that because it didn't start today. It started last year when you all gave the superintendent the charge. Let's get a plan together and let's start moving the district. So I thank you for that support.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos, and thank you for your strong leadership that's led us in this direction. We appreciate it. The next item is approval of waiver for teacher data portal. Dr. Noyola.
Mr. Powers, board members, Dr. Cavazos, superintendent, staff, and audience. In 2009, the 81st Texas Legislature enacted legislation to provide greater access to student assessment data to parents, students, educators, and so forth. In that effort, the state developed a data system called the Texas Assessment Management System that would become available to teachers for that use in order to be able to access student data. However, that system does not allow us to be able to administer our local assessments. And when I talk about local assessments, I'm talking about things like benchmarks and common formative assessments and so forth. So what we were doing in the past was we would develop our own benchmarks internally. We'd administer them to our students, and then we would find the means by which we would generate that data. And so what the state has developed is a waiver that if we don't want to use the state system, but we want to use a separate system that will give us that state assessment data with additional components to it, we will be allowed as long as we submit a waiver for that. So the system that that Curriculum and Instruction is recommending is a system called Tango. Tango allows our teachers to be able to access all the state assessment data, STAR results, and so forth. But it also allows us to develop our benchmarks via that system, and it generates the data for us to be able to get the data out to our teachers so that they can use that data to guide the instruction that will follow. And so tonight we are recommending approval for us to submit this TEA waiver to use Tango instead of the TAM system that the state has made available.
Dr. Yola, the Tango is something we've had that about a year and a half ago.
Correct.
Is that correct? Right.
Yes.
That's when
We brought it in at last year.
Right. So it has the capacity to do this now.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Very well. Well, I'll move approval of the waiver for the teacher data portal as recommended by the administration.
I second the motion.
Moved by Mr. McShann, second by Dr. Muniz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. The next item is matters relating to business services. Julio Cavazos, approval of resolution to adopt the tax rate.
Thank you, Mr. Powers, Dr. Cavazos, board members. Agenda item 8A is approval of resolution to adopt the tax rate for the 2014-2015 school year. We discussed this in detail at our public hearing held on August 16, 2014. Administration is recommending the tax rate of $1.21.8 per $100 worth of valuation. This is divided into maintenance operations of $1.04 and debt service of $17.8. This represents a no increase from last year. Be glad to answer any questions the board might have.
Can you repeat that? No increase?
No increase from last year.
Just clarifying.
Do you have a motion?
I'll move that we accept the recommendation by the administration on the tax rate.
Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
All right, moved by Mrs. Young, seconded by the doctor, and by Dr. Pettis, and I don't think there's any further discussion on this item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. The next item is matters relating to human services. Approval of revisions to local policies, BQA local, FEC local, FFE local, on second reading. Mrs. Vargas.
Thank you, Mr. Powers, Dr. Cavazos, board members. We bring for your consideration and possible approval revisions regarding 3 local policies, 3 BQA local, planning and decision-making process at the district level, FEC local, focused on attendance and attendance for credit, and FFC local, focused on student welfare. You'll find these revisions in the yellow folder on the dais. And these revisions were discussed at our last policy audit committee meeting. However, I do have a revision. I will call your attention to FEC local. We are recommending that the section dealing with taking of attendance be removed from policy and that it be better placed in administrative guidelines. Mrs. Fleurier serves as our committee chair, and she may have additional information to share with the committee tonight.
I just would like to say that I concur with this suggestion, and I believe that Mr. Julio Cavazos has been involved in working on this as well, and he and Mrs. Vargas agree that this is the right step for us to take. Certainly, we all know that things are done differently on campuses now, and it'd be very difficult for everyone to do it exactly the same way at exactly the same time. And, you know, in the old days, we were able to do things like that. But nowadays, I think that this is a wise move. And certainly we'll be doing it, be aware of what we're doing, but it'll be done through some guidelines as opposed to being done through policy. Julio?
That is correct. Actually, FBB local defines the attendance for a county. FBC local is attendance for credit. So most of this verbiage is in FBB local, which we're not recommending any changes. But the superintendent does have the authority to define the periods of taking attendance at the campus.
I think it's a good idea. Are there any questions from the board members? Thank you. Are there any questions on any of the policies that we're considering? If not, as committee chair, I move approval of revisions to local policies, legal and local, on second reading as presented by administration.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. Moved by Mrs. Fleury, seconded by Mr. McShann. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Approved. The next item is matters relating to district operations. Approval of final construction payments to CS Advantage USAA, Inc. for HCISD re-roofing project Phase 3. Mr. Tapia.
President Powers, members of the board. This is the final payment, was presented at the last Facilities Committee meeting we had on September 2nd. Final payment to CS Advantage USA Roofing Company in the amount of $35,374.45. Final payment does require board approval as per policy CV, so we recommend approval. Any questions?
Any further discussion?
I move approval of the final construction payment as recommended by the administration.
Moved by Mr. McShann,
Second.
seconded by Mr. De Leon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next item is the Facilities Committee report. Mr. Tapia, please.
Thank you, President Powers, members of the board. Like I said earlier, September 2nd, we had a Facilities Committee meeting. We did discuss the small Austin sidewalk project at Austin Elementary. Then we went on to the update of the school health professions. They're overall about 80% complete. And we talked about the timeline, and the architect will give us an update as to where we are in that at the next meeting. We also talked about the bomb projects, the aquatic center, about 85% complete. The classroom wing additions at Jefferson Elementary, the high school kitchen renovations, and several small storage and restrooms pavilions at various campuses, and some small re-roofing projects. And we also went over a couple small change orders and a final payment that we approved tonight. Construction funds report was given by Julio Cavazos. Any questions?
Mr. McShann, would you like to elaborate as the chairman of that committee?
I'd like to say that the facilities that we addressed, and we know that we have right now the School of Health Professions that is under construction. President Powers, Dr. Cavazos and I toured that facility. Mr. Went ahead and we had a tour last week, and it was really, let me tell you, I think, Dr. Muniz, you've been out there to take a look at it, but the design of that school is different than anything we've ever had. It is really state of the art, and it's going to really connect very well for teaching. It's really just outstanding. So we're very pleased. I know that the architect is going to, you're probably meeting with them, I think, tomorrow, and give you an update as to looking at the completion date, but we're very pleased with the facility report. That's all I have to report this time. Thank you, Mr.
Let me just add, as part of the group that went over to view the facilities, it was amazing. The superintendent on the job was commenting about, he's built several schools now in the area on of health profession type high schools. He said there's nothing like our school in this area. And even upstate, he's been involved in a few projects, and he said that the facilities and the way we've designed our classrooms and the whole project is very unique, and it's something we ought to be really, really proud of. So just wanted to add that.
And perhaps soon we will be able to go to a state conference and see that we have won an award for that design.
Good. I hope so.
I hope
Very
so.
well. Very
So
well.
move, so move.
All right. The next item is adjournment into closed session or executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082 of the Open Meetings Act for the following purposes. A, discuss employment of principal for Stewart Place Elementary School. B, discuss employment of assistant principal for Dishman Elementary School. C, discuss employment of teachers and other professional staff. D, discuss purchase of property. We will now go into closed session. And the first item is to consider employment of principal for Stewart Place Elementary School.
Mr. President, I would like to move approval as recommended by staff. Let's see, may I say the name?
I guess. yeah.
Mr. Bill Staveley.
Second the motion.
All right. Moved by Mrs. Fleury and seconded by Dr. Pettis. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next item, consider employment of assistant principal for Dishman Elementary School.
Mr. President, I make a motion for approval as recommended by administration for the employment of assistant principal at Dishman Elementary.
Moved by Mr. De Leon, seconded by Mrs. Young. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Number 3, consider employment of teachers and other professional staff.
That I move approval of employment of teachers as recommended by the administration.
Moved by Mr. McShann and seconded by
I second the motion.
Dr. Muniz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Last item, consider on the purchase of property.
Mr. President, I authorize administration to negotiate and consider purchase of real property as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Pettis, seconded by Mr. De Leon, that we authorize administration to pursue negotiations. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Very good.
Good meeting.
Very good, sir.